agenda, and the world over there is such a resistance. And when we look at institutions of gender and women's studies, how many of them are being closed down, especially Eastern Europe now is just getting rid. So that is a setback. And I think where feminism was focused on structural inequalities, right? So how do we deal with inequalities embedded in structures and institutions and so on? There's been a shift to sexuality, right? So LGBTIQ trans, those are issues of sexuality, but I'm not saying there are no structural issues, but what I'm saying is it also shifts the politics to a type of identity politics where people make choices. Where if you talk about structural inequality, very often people don't have choices in how they are located in terms of these structures. So we need to think about what are we saying about structural inequalities, and I think the problem the world over now is the big inequality between the haves and the have-nots, or the rich and the poor, and that inequality gap becomes bigger and bigger, and it's the biggest in my country. We have the highest Gini coefficient in terms of inequality. So in conditions like that, I mean, in my country, there's 60 million people in my country, of which 21 million live on a meager grant that they get once a month from the government. It's not even enough to survive on. So if you have so many people excluded, men and women, children, issues of gender equality it's something that it's not a priority. And so we have to start to think in how we're dealing with just inequality in general. And we know the feminization of poverty has a woman's face, right? But unless we start to deal with poverty and inequality, it's very hard to set a feminist agenda, and that's why it's I think so lost at the moment. Competing also then with identity politics, so I think we're just at a very strange place globally. If we look at the wars that's going on, we look at climate change, all kinds of things impacting specifically developing countries. It becomes very difficult to drive a feminist agenda. And I'm not saying we shouldn't try. I mean, I'm one of those people who try, but it is just complicated. Quotas. Yeah, I think it is quotas. What quotas have shown us, quotas for women, is that unless you do have the quotas, women just don't get into government. Look at, for example, the United States. They don't have a quota, and they have very low numbers of women in Congress, and I think that's why somebody like Kamala Harris just couldn't make it. I mean, on the intersection of gender and race, it would have been very difficult in the United States. So quotas make a difference. And I think if we want then to talk about equal representation of the LGBTIQ trans community, then create quotas. That I'm sure will make a difference.
So we have this biometric kind of thing, and we have this, what is the Aadhaar card, central Aadhaar card, which has the option to have male, female, or other. But despite that, and there is this card. I don't know whether, I think you spoke about it as well, that there's a kind of a victimization when the identification is made. So is that something we should worry about? Because, here we are trying to give a place which might be actually misused, abused in a way. And that's we can't stop thinking about it because that change has to come. We can't stop doing anything about it also, but are there other ways that we can fast track this, this change of a mentality and of policy? Because, you have one of the lawyers who's drafted the Domestic Violence Act in India. The title of her books is called Women's Lives and Men's Laws. So basically, if the laws are made by the men, having said that, to imagine that if women were making it, it would be largely different. Hopefully, yes, but that's not so. But how do we go about it? I mean, you've had the experience of working in the commission, at the operational level. And, and when you were kind of making some strides, your tenure wasn't extended, which is how, that's the kind of reactions that happen. So is it tokenism that's happening? Is it just a vote bank thing? Is there a political economy to, keeping, because as you said, the women are themselves sometimes taking this line of least resistance and have also been socialized into thinking where they are. So where do you, in terms of the change that we can do or make, what do you see as something that, we can move forward on?
Well, I think it's quite difficult because what we now see, and specifically in the United States, is a backlash against what's called the woke culture, right? So, and why is it that trans is such a threat? Is because of the fluidity, right? So now you have gender fluidity. You don't have this binary where you have women on the one side and men on the other side, and where you could talk about role assignments and gender divisions of labor and so on. That changes if everything becomes fluid, and people are always very scared of change, and especially when it comes, to issues of sexuality. I think people sometimes are also very intrigued by it, but they don't want to acknowledge it. So that makes it very complicated. And you have this polarization around issues of sexuality and gender and this what's called the woke culture. I think, if we go back to the radicals of the 1970s and 80s who said consciousness raising is the method, right? So it's all about consciousness raising. And, what we have in South Africa, for example, is a men's organization called Sonke Gender Justice, but they have a program called One Man Can. And what that means is that if one man talks to another man about violence, and he talks to another man, you get a snowball effect, right? So I think that in our own, circumstances, our own worlds where we live in, is to make that difference, just to talk. In South Africa, there's a lot of jokes, right? Sometimes they're racist, sometimes they're sexist. And when you are standing around with your friends and somebody makes that joke, you keep quiet because you don't want to, stop the party or be the one to actually interfere. But I think that's exactly the problem. Unless you say something, then it just continues in the way it continues.
Yes, absolutely. So we need to have these conversations. We need to have conversations with children so that, the socialization is in a way, because it starts young when we think about it. So thank you so much. That's Abhiruchi, I'm sure you have some comments and questions also to make. And anybody else, for the last, we've taken a lot of our time, and I don't see any questions here at this point in time. So I'm going to officially tell Abhiruchi to give the vote of thanks. Alvira, on behalf of Sarojini Naidu Centre, also, if you can just say a word, put your camera on.
Good evening, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yeah. Go on.
Okay. Good evening, ma'am. Thank you so much for this informative and very, just like Abhijit has mentioned, a perspective coming from South Africa was very new for us. We have engaged with a lot of the Indian issues and the issues concerning the English since it has been one of my master's discipline. So thank you so much for the insightful session. It was it was really honorable session. I mean, honorable moments to attend the session. Thank you so much on behalf of all the SNCWS family.
I think the net wasn't great, so our voice is breaking. Thank you, Alvira. Abhiruchi,
I heard.
Abhijit, you want to have, we want to get a mail in for the second last word.
No, ma'am, just thank you for introducing South Africa to us in gender context. Hopefully, we'll be reading your book and other texts and, collaborating more. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think there was a question about whether the book is available on Amazon.
Yeah.
The book is nearly time for it to become open access. There's a two-year lag time, so it came out in 2023. So, yeah, I have copies that I can mail, but then you would need to order it from me, and yeah.
Thank you. Abhiruchi, all yours. Thank you so much. We hope to have you over in person when you visit.
I would love that. I love India. It's wonderful. Yeah. And thank you for the opportunity and for inviting me.
Thank you so much. It's my proud privilege to now formally give vote of thanks to you. Like that person who had written about a book and how can we access, I had also written to Professor Amanda Gouws long back, 2012. That time I didn't know that you were Commissioner for Gender Equality, but you were kind enough, you gave me time, and it got me to think I had an interaction with you. I met you and took your interview. And as you can see, even when she was very busy that time, she gave me a lot of time. I asked lots of questions. And then Professor Gouws at the end said, that's it? These are the only questions that you have? So she was... I was tired. But she really wanted to engage. Only when I came